Okay, so basically, when I start a track, I just open a fresh new project, of course, and then I choose which key I'll be working in. And for that matter, I use a website called Piano Web, which is an handy tool. It can showcase for every key, every modes of every scale. So let's say I'm in G, probably I'm using a Phrygian or a Spanish Gypsy, which are like the two main um, scale I use in my sounds. And you can see, so I'm in G Spanish Gypsy, and it prompts me every note in that scale. So I can then copy them in uh, my DAW. So I put them here in place. So here, and then I displace them before the start of the MIDI file. So if I play, so they won't play all the scale, but they are present. And if I press unfold, I will now only have the notes of the scale. So everything I place from there will be in that scale. And that's really cool to have because I know I cannot go wrong with that. Uh, so from there, I just do chords. So to create chords, I usually just use triads, so which are the fundamental of the chords, 2 degrees above and then 2 degrees above. Yeah, that sent something else to. Okay. And then, well, for the chord progression, I either search for working chord progressions that are common in pop songs or whatever, like 1, 4, 5, 1, for example, or stuff like that. I try different stuff and see what works. And so you can see, even in my chord progression, I try to have this dotted rhythm I talked about earlier. Here too. And this gives some bounce to the overall groove of the chord progression and the evolution of the melody. So only the chords, they sound like this. And from there, so let's say I have one, so I make the pad playing. And my melody is basically every time hitting notes from the chord that is playing at the same time. So this way I'm sure they will add up nicely. If you see my melody, it follows the chord progression. And basically just once I go out of the chord to make some tension, because having some one semitone intervals make the biggest tension you could have. So if you make a G sharp playing over this chord, it makes for some dissonant sound for a little period of time, and then when you hit back on the full chord, full harmonious chord, your ear will be satisfied, and it gives for some ear candy to make natural chords sounds nicer than they really are. So yeah, I just followed notes from the chord progression, so it's really easy. I just pop some notes on there and yeah, basically make random. Either I choose my rhythm beforehand and then place the notes from the on and then place the note on the chord progression. Either I just go by here and place them a bit randomly to see what's cool. But I usually do some FM rhythm like I showed earlier to have an interesting rhythm, because that's like half of a nice melody is a nice rhythm. And since I have a nice chord progression, if I then added them together, I have both part of a good melody, which is nice rhythm and nice melodic content to it. So yeah, that's basically how I go about it. And then when I have my main melody that is doing some nice moving when I have my melody that is looping correctly, resolving and not feeling unresolved, because that's a nice thing to have, is to have a good melody that is going somewhere and then resolving back home, either on the root note of the key or on the fifth. That's basically the two homes of the scale. When I have my melody coming back home, I can place it in my track. And then when it's working, when a good melody is easily rememberable, I don't know if it's English, but yeah. When it's working, you can basically add any notes you want inside that main melody, and it will always sound good because you already hear a full version of the melody. And then your brain can focus on the main melody and hear those little embellishments around it. So that's basically what I do. I do my main melody here and then complexify it in a level 2 melody, like written here. And then I have my full craziness happening, where I take my melody and break it apart on like 3 or 4 octaves, and with those huge glides I like to make. But basically, if you look closely, they are all the same notes as my main melody, which is this one. And really, there is no rule here. I just take one, drop one. And then I make them overlap a bit, so they glide. Wasn't expecting that. And yeah, basically that's my process to reach melodies and cohesivity between my chords, my melodies, and all my other elements. Because yeah, as I said, everything is based on my chord progression. So even my arps, I just place my chord progression here and put an arpeggiator on it, and it gives me really complex stuff. But basically, it's just all the time the same. So yeah, it can be really quick when I have a good chord progression. It can be really quick to arrange an entire track from that. What I like to do too is taking those chords and make the FM patches play on the root note of that chord progression. Let me show you. Okay, here. Yep. And then I come back to what I said earlier about doing rhythms and stuff. I can even take the rhythm I have here and just copy paste it on the root notes of the chord. Okay, so it would be D from here. And then I go like that on hold the melody. Okay. So yeah, that's a good way to make variations in your FM sounds, because they don't only play on one note, and even if the same rhythms is playing for a long time, since it moves, the ear doesn't get too much used to it, and you can make them roll for a longer time. Even if it's a 1-bar rhythm loop, you can displace them on melody, and it's really nice touch to add to your tracks. Melodify is the 0, yeah, numpad 0.
Useless.
with that reverb, it was really nice.
I got a question. How do you go about when you want to introduce your melody?
Okay, so there are a lot of ways. The more common one is to use the end of your loop, like let's say the last 1/2 beat, 1/2 bar, sorry, and place it in long reverb and make it play let me show you, in earlier parts. Wait. So how did I introduce my melody? Yeah, here. Okay, so here I mostly introduce my patch by doing the glides I like to do. I really like that.
Yeah.
And then like I said, I use the end of the loop. Just some very short snippets of the melody. So at the end of the bar, and at the beginning, I use another one. I always use some, how you say that, like some motifs that are easily recognizable in the main melody. I select one or two parts and I use them beforehand. Then I use them more often. And the closer I get to melody, the closer they get together. And then it repeats. And coming the melody, I use only the glides. And in the overall track, it sounds like this. It starts like really dull and distant, and it comes further apart. And it comes closer, sorry. Oops. So yeah, basically that's usually how I introduce my stuff. You can notice here at the very beginning of the track, I did the same. I reused like exactly the same progression I have here. I used it in the beginning, uh, so that it ties together the track. It announces where the track is going right from the start. But I never, in the earlier part, I don't release the full melody. I only keep the main recognizable elements of the melody. And then I go into the overall chord progression. What is kind of important to introduce a good melody is to have a good chord support, I find at least. So I tend to release the full chord progression before the full melody, because this way the brain is already programmed to almost feel where the melody is going and what it's going to be, since my melodies are based on the chord progression. If that makes sense to you. And
I find I tried using chords and stuff, but every time it just muddies up the whole fucking thing. How do you go about that to make sure that the chords that you lay down, the chord progression, doesn't really conflict so much with everything else? Because I mean, you're using like 3 or 4 notes at the same time in a very crowded type of style of music.
well, since it comes down to what I was talking earlier. Since they play, like, how do I phrase that? Yes, I used several melodies and several songs at the same time, but since they are all based on the same chord progression, they all play harmoniously. They all play on like non-conflict frequencies, but they play on interconnected frequencies.
Okay, so you would have like the chord maybe on octave 2, and then you have the melody playing at octave 3, and then you have
like
another
that.
melody on octave 4 to 5 maybe.
Yeah, exactly. And
okay,
so I have something like that, plus the fact that the melody will play. Like if you look at my melody, I didn't use the root note of the chord. I used mostly the fifths. See, if I were to use the root notes, I would have used like G, G, B, then I would have used the D, but then I used a different note of the triad, which is giving me room for the FM patches to play on the root note of the chord. So the FM patch and the melody, even if they play in the same octave, they won't play in the same note precisely. And then they will play in harmony and not in unison on the same note. And this is kind of an important part of my crowded style to keep kind of clarity in the mix, is to have stuff playing in harmony and not in unison. Which is, yeah, a good way to not muddy up the mix. Is to have, yeah, them displaced on octaves and on different notes.
Okay, yeah, it makes sense. Makes total sense.
The chord patch is, wait a minute. I need to find it. It's basically a layer. Yeah, it's two silent. One, probably some presets I found and I layered them. One is doing the lower part, and one is doing only the sharp attack. So together they play, they have some nice body, but at the same time some higher frequency to pierce through the mix. And I wasn't talking about unison in the sound designing way, but unison in the music theory way, which is playing in unison is to play at the same note. Like, let's say I have two patches playing in G, they are playing in unison. But if I make one in C and one in G, they are playing a chord and they are playing in harmony. And this is the difference between harmony and unison. So yeah, that one I should have explained before all my explanation, but now it's done. So yeah, that's the main reason why I have a lot of sound that are not clashing. It's because they play in harmony. So if I have an harp playing, my melody will play above that or in the same octave, but on a different note than the main harp going on.
Yeah, makes sense.
And yeah, that's linked to Uncle questions earlier about how I have my FM and my main melody not clashing. That's because my FM is playing in G, like on the root note of the overall track, with some variations, of course. And my main melody is playing on several octaves and never on the G, or really few on the G. And that's why I can have both of the the good of the both world, the FM really loud and the good melody keep shining through. Uh, that's really something to keep in mind. And same the stabs. Like if you have a recurring stab every bar or something, try not to make it play on the root note, but a fourth lower or a fifth higher. Try to play with some different notes, and it makes some tension to. You can make your recurring stab going like a semitone above, three above, and going up the scale or down the scale if you need an outro. And it gives some subconscious tension and somewhere to go, which is really cool to have. So there it basically plays the root note of the chord progression, I guess. But yeah, it's here to just underlie the overall track. Yeah, another question maybe? Or did I answer all you need to know, Dada?
Yeah, man. Don't always play everything in the same, using the same note, basically.
Yeah,
Can be a cool trick.
But
I think
the bass is mostly in G, in, for example, the FM part, I think.
Mm-hmm.
So the FM leads are also playing in G. So yeah, you just did some proper EQing there in order for the bass and the FM leads to not clash, I think.
Yeah. Something too is my main bass is going to do some bounce between notes, and I think it plays on the root note of the key, on the root note of the chord. Yeah, let me pop and oscilloscope if you want. Hey Giovanni, how are you?
Hey mate.
Yo, Giovanni.
What's up?
Dudes.
Yeah, so that's basically the root note. No, not the root note. It's following the melody. So my root note would be a G, but I make it play a D, like the melody is starting on a D instead of a G. So it doesn't clash with the FM patches which are playing in G.
Yeah.
As I showed you.
It's really clever.
So yeah, main thing is really to think what to place where, and how to overcome some issues. Like if you want to place your FM on a lower octave, you'll run into the issue that it will get sloppy and not clean at all. So instead of going a full G octave lower, you could just bring it like 7 semitones down and play on the chord, and so you won't be like 12 semitones down. You would keep that 5 semitone difference, and that makes for a huge difference in the end in the overall FM sound. For those who play a lot with FMs, that could be a nice trick too. So yeah, that's a bit like, I see it like a puzzle in the frequency spectrum, where everything is going and why mostly. Because if you do stuff without knowing why, first you'll probably do shit, and secondly you won't remember next time. And as I said earlier, like remembering why something works is really important and kind of rewarding too, because you feel you progress and you learn something every track you do.
It's my fault.
So yeah.
I don't know what the fuck I'm doing, and I never remember what I did. So
Clueless
Yeah.
producer.
yeah.
but
Hey, we all know
just
that, man.
but just so that I actually get it. So when you're playing with the melody, your bass is actually not playing in the root note. It's following the root note of the chord.
No.
The melody.
In this case, it's not following the root chord of the chord, but it's following the melody, which is playing on the third note of the triad. So my melody is how do I phrase that? Okay, so my melody.
I think I get it. You have like mostly D notes in your melody, or
Yeah, that's it. So if I were to play my melody on the root note of the chord, I would play mostly G. But in this case, I play mostly D, then G sharp, then G, and I follow the upper note of the chord. And I run into the issue. I wanted my bass to follow the chord of the root note of the chord, but if I did so, if I wanted that bouncy feel that it had, I would have went into G -1, which is like ridiculously low for a bass. Like it doesn't look like a bass, basically.
It never sounds good, man.
No.
Yeah, so basically I decided to use the lower part of the chord, which was D, and D is really cool for bass. So yeah, it gives that bounciness I wanted. Plus, it's on an audible range, which is yeah, kind of cool, and it follows the melody, the first motif of the melody, and then I repeated it, and it gives some nice, evolution. Something to notice here is, even though my bass is going up and down on different notes, I kept my main overlapping bass on the same note because I was way too lazy to rephase them every time.
I saw that, man.
And in the end, it sounds like a bouncy, it sounds like a bounce. But if I put them on the real note, I should. Like the difference is not that high, I think.
Yeah, but it just feels strange.
But yeah, it feels strange and I lose my sub basically. So I decided I would keep it all in G. And it was working really cool. So
Really clever, man.
Yeah. So
I always do that. I never change the root, the first bass note when I write my bass grooves because I'm also lazy in that way. I don't want to rephase everything.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Or resample the bass. It's just easier to use a second and the third note and write down your
True,
groove
true.
instead.
Totally. And the other case I use, so to keep following on the kick and bass, sometimes I would do like the full-on 0 1 0 1 0 1 bass pattern, like this one.
Like you mean a whole octave?
Like this. Let me show you. But you can see it can clash.
Groove.
Yeah, like it can clash with the sub of the kick. In this case, it's not that terrible, but yeah, it's not optimal. So what I do is I duplicate my kick here, and I do takes some time. So a low kick and a high kick with some chains. And then I will face the lower one, which is already done, and the higher one, I will slightly adjust the sub phase so it fits better for the high notes. Okay, I'm on
Hello.
headphones, so yo.
Yo, Shep.
Yo.
So it's probably not optimal, but yeah, you get the point. I phase them, and then I basically just switch chain wherever the higher one is playing. I'll do an automation about that. So where is it? Oops. Okay, here. So I'll go from high one, low one here. So it keeps going from the phased lower one and the phased higher one. And this way I keep the optimal phase relation between both. And that's the way I use a lot of time. And it works with different octaves on the bass, but it works too if you change the note. So if I were to go into like a D bass line, I would rephase it and then just change which kick we'd play at that point in time. And it saves me the time of resampling the bass and rephasing it every time and stuff. So yeah, I find it kind of useful to do stuff like that. And something I found in kick too, which is kind of cool to phase the kick, to make it like a phase rotation, a phase start point rotation. I do that little, I displace the first note slightly to the right, and then I have the first note to move. And this way I can have like a phase rotation node here, which is, yeah, I use it all the time. It's really easier to phase the kick and bass this way.
It's nice.
So yeah, that was about
But
kick and bass
the
quickly.
chain thing with the automation for the low and high kick.
Yeah.
Is Ableton specific? Like a different way to approach it would just be to place like a high kick on the grid before the high bass note hits, right?
The workaround in non-Ableton would be to have two samples. Basically, I named it high kick, but it's not really higher.
Yeah.
It's just like the phase that is different. I called it high because it's phasing with the high bass, but the kick is basically the same. It's just phase rotated. So I would do like a sample of the low phased rotating kick and a sample of the high phased rotating kick, and then just duplicate them along with the kick and bass, along with the bass. Sorry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, because it's the those blue bars beneath the 0 to 127. That's the part I didn't understand. But
yeah, so it's just it's a selection between one patch and the other. So the low would be one patch and the high would be another. And the selector is you place it over which one you want it to play. I don't know if that makes sense to you. But yeah, I don't know if you
automate that and then it picks one or the other.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if there is something in FL Studio that resembles that, but yeah.
No idea. Probably not.
Sounds like Valhalla room in there.
That's because my apartment is Valhalla room.
Oh, nice.
I named it Valhalla.
Valhalla Studio.
Yeah. But yeah, only you guys will understand. My friends didn't get it.
Lul. No
told
more
you.
plugins buying.
Hey, you have to change friends.
Now this is weird because every kick I've listened to for the past 3 weeks has reverb on it.
Time to make techno then.
No, this is what
Yeah,
got
you
these,
can make some warehouse techno with the rumble reverb kicks.
Yeah. No, that's what they got the DT 880s for, 880s. So,
Yeah.
Everything's
Less
better.
room sound. So yeah, do you have any more questions or?
Questions.
How do you usually start a track? Do you go for the standard, do a kick and bass and some percussions, and then go from there, or do you start from making a chord progression and like
Yeah,
building a drop?
I always have when I open my template, I always have a kick and bass. Well, I could show you actually. Yeah, let me show you.